This is the Pioneer XDJ-RX2. It's meant to simulate a DJM and CDJ type of workflow, complete with Rekordbox capabilities, for about $1,700 US. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why I think it's worth every penny. What's up, everybody? I'm David Michael, host of the Passionate DJ podcast, and today we're hanging out with the XDJ-RX2. Now, if you're not familiar with the Passionate DJ podcast, this is a weekly talk show dedicated to the art and science of mixing music. So if you're like me and you're dedicated to becoming a better DJ through passion and purpose, head on over to passionatedj.com or your favorite podcast app and hit that subscribe button and never miss a single episode. Okay, so the XDJ-RX2, this is a great system from Pioneer. I really enjoy it. I really dig the idea behind creating this controller. Now, basically what you end up with is a system that's standalone, no laptop required. It plays off of a Rekordbox using a USB key just like this one here. And you're able to plug your Rekordbox library in there, which is prepared using the free Rekordbox software. And then it will do everything that you want right here, kind of on this shared screen. It's meant to simulate the type of workflow that you get with a CDJ or XDJ and mixer setup at a much cheaper price. Remember, a Nexus 902 mixer is over $2,000, and same with the CDJ Nexus 2. Now, that's not what this is either. Let's be very clear about that. For one thing, this is 2 channels. It doesn't have all the fancy gear that the super top-end CDJs have, but it is pretty feature-laden. It does all the basic things that you want, and it does get you used to playing on that sort of industry-standard setup that DJs are so often worried about for playing their first club or festival where they need to approach a set of CDJs. You will basically feel at home here. If you've ever used Pioneer CDJs, the one thing that's a little bit tricky is using this shared screen. It's very efficient, it's very neat, and I like that. It keeps everything up here. It does throw me off just a little bit because normally in this spot, I actually have a hardware mixer and XDJ 1000s, and they have their own separate screens. So everything else within Rekordbox pretty much works the way I expect. The difference being on this one, you've got parallel waveforms going across one on top of the other. Also, besides the fact that it's not 4 channels, there are some things that are mixing from a super high-end Pioneer mixer. This is more comparable. In fact, this is almost exactly the same thing as a Pioneer DJM 450. If you were to just slice out this middle mixing section part, that's basically what you would end up with. You also have a set of performance pads, which makes it a little more controller-like, but once again, everything else works pretty much the way you would expect a set of CDJs and a mixer in the modern era to work. So what I'd like to do is go onto the mixing board here, take you to my perspective, and we're going to kind of go through and play with all these buttons, twiddle some knobs, get a feel for how this thing actually works in practice, and see what all you get for that hard-earned $1,700. Starting with the deck section over here, like I said, it's pretty similar to what you would expect from a CDJ or XDJ-like setup. You've got your basic cue and pause functions here. Cue, of course, sets a cue point or cues and plays if you hold it down. Of course, you see you've got the nice center display here, which works just like the old school CDJs. Then your play-pause button. We've got our track search and seek buttons over here. We've got our pitch control over here, and that pitch control is adjustable from 6% to 10% to 16 and wide means a full 100% pitch adjustment. Master tempo, of course, is your key lock that allows you to adjust the speed of the track without adjusting the key. You've got your sync and master controls right here with your instant doubles. Your vinyl jog mode, yes, you can scratch with this controller. Up here we've got the vinyl speed adjust. And what this is for is to actually set the breaking speed, so when you hit the play-pause button, does it stop immediately or does it sort of slow down like a old turntable? You've got your cue and loop recall, so you can set memory cues and then recall them right here. You've got your basic looping functions right here. The jog wheel One difference between this and the CDJs is these are smaller, but they are large in comparison to other controllers. So I did not find them to be too small to use. I have pretty large hands, and they are working just fine for me. Of course, the display does react to what you're doing here on the jog wheel. It does matter if you touch the top, of course. This puts you in scratch mode. Touching the outer ring is like a pitch bend. Those are the basics of the deck section. Of course, up here at the top on a controller, you would often find effects here, but because this mimics a Pioneer setup, we will get to the effects in the mixing section. Up here instead, what you have are mic controls. You've got a power on and off and talk over right there, so you can have it duck the music when you're talking. You've got 2 microphone inputs on the back. You can control the volume of those and an EQ of those right here. All right, moving on to the mixer section here in the middle. Like I said, this is very much similar to a DJM 450 mixer. It has all the stuff that you would expect a basic 2-channel mixer to have. It has a crossfader down here with an adjustable curve, although it is not super precise on the adjustment. It just lets you go kind of to scratch mode or linear or just off. Then you've got your 2 line faders, of course. It does have a Q and master mix for your headphones. That's something that I insist on personally as a DJ. It does not have split Q, which would split your left and right channels, so you can Q in one ear and listen to the master in the right. And I'm not the world's best scratch DJ, but the crossfader is up to the task, and just to prove it, here's a quick clip. Of course, we've got your basic 3-band EQ on each side, your master level, your trim pots right there, and then you can adjust right here what is playing out of each channel, whether that's deck 1 or 2. Of course, that means it's playing from the USB key, or a line or phono input. That's right, this is an actual hardware mixer, so you can use this with turntables or CDJs or basically anything that you want. Over here to the left, you've got this auxiliary 3rd input as well. This does not give you any EQ controls. It doesn't give you much of anything other than sort of an attenuation adjustment there, which is nice. So if you have a phone or some device that's kind of quiet, you can just boost that signal and it will make it a little bit louder. We do have a booth monitor up here, so you do have separate booth outputs as you would expect. And then you've got your cue buttons right here to cue your left deck, your right deck, or your master in the headphones. Now, let's talk about effects. This does bring over a couple of basic color effects, and if you're not familiar with Pioneer gear, what that is they are basic single turn knob effects that do something progressive the more you turn them, and you enable those using these buttons right here. As you see, the filter button is flashing because that's the last thing I tried. So if you twist and turn the knobs here, it will adjust whatever is turned on over here. Then you have the standard effects section from Pioneer mixers that has been around for a long time. Very simple version of it. Right here you select, is this adjusting what's coming through the mic or affecting the channel 1, channel 2, or the master. You adjust the tempo of the beat that is being applied to the effects right there. You can tap the tempo. You can adjust the parameters down here, and of course the big shiny blue button turns it on and off. One thing I do like that they did with the effects on this particular unit was they added the parameter knob for the color effects, and what that allows you to do is adjust some particular parameter for each of these color effects. The reason I like this, for example, is in the case of the noise color effects, which adds a layer of white noise, which you could use to create a build or something like that, a bit of tension in the mix. On my other Pioneer mixer, that's basically an on-off thing, and when you twist the color effects knob, it just kind of changes the tone of the white noise, whereas on this, you can actually just bring in a teeny tiny little bit of white noise and slowly bring it in and then do a little filter sweep with it. And it makes this really nice gradual thing. That's the kind of way that I like to use effects, and just that little touch really makes those more subtle effects usage case scenarios possible, and I applaud Pioneer for adding that. Up here at the top right, once again, you would have effects over here if this were a standard DJ controller for software, but being that this is a hardware controller, what you get over here are actually 2 USB ports. Now this is really nice because not only can you play from 2 different sources, but you can actually use that second port with this master record button, which will allow you to record a WAV file of the output of this mixer straight to that USB key, which means it makes it super easy to record. You don't have to hook up anything extra, you don't have to download an app, you just plop that in there, hit record, and it will write straight to the drive. Pretty awesome. And then the one thing that may be different for some of you that might be an adjustment, especially if you're already familiar with CDJs, we've got the track browsing and display section. Now this here, like I said, this shows parallel waveforms, so you've got one stacked on top of the other. The only thing that I found a little bit different is when you're browsing and you're looking for a track, I'm used to clicking in this button right here to be able to load a track because that's what I would do on a CDJ, but actually, because it's a shared screen, you actually have to click this to load it into this deck, or 2 to load it into deck 2, which is really intuitive and makes a lot of sense. I'm just used to doing it the other way, so when I do that, I'll click in and it'll just pop up and say, hey, what do you mean, deck 1 or 2? So it doesn't really throw you off too bad to where it would, be problematic for a gig or anything like that. Outside of that, everything works exactly how you would expect from a CDJ type setup. Everything's very responsive, super high-res touchscreen, looks great. We'll play from MIDI as a controller, we'll play straight from Rekordbox DJ or off of USB 1 or 2. Aesthetically, I have no complaints. This looks exactly like you would expect a Pioneer type system to look. It has that same kind of very Spartan, professional-looking appearance that you have come to expect out of Pioneer gear. Like I said, this is basically a DJM 450, so you've got that same kind of knobs and stuff on here. You've got the color effects knobs that look like large aluminum knobs, but they're actually plastic. Everything kind of looks like it's painted or brushed aluminum, but it is plastic, but it's all very sturdy. It's actually very heavy, which could be a problem for some of you mobile DJs out there, depending on how you view it. Once again, if you were into CDJs and DJM setup anyways, this is lighter and smaller than that, and it's all in one, and you don't have to drag your laptop out too. And that's part of the value of something like this, is not worrying about the price of a laptop or bringing it to a gig and risking it, or risking it crashing, or worrying so much about data loss. You just have your USB key and maybe a backup, and you're pretty much set. Of course, then you've got to figure out where this thing fits, especially if you're playing somewhere that other DJs play, which is the same thing that anybody with a large controller has to deal with. You just might not want to if the whole point is moving to a Rekordbox-like setup that simulates CDJs. Still, I think all that being said, this is a great value for anybody who does want that type of Rekordbox setup. Personally, I have a pair of XDJ-1000s, the Mark I release, and a DJM-850, and that's my sort of poor man's version of the industry standard setup. This is another way to do it, and this is a lot cleaner, tighter way to do it. A lot less wires, a lot less hookup. It's just plug and play and go. It does everything that you want it to as far as mixing songs together, being able to scratch. It's got nice high quality pads. It does all the stuff that you would expect Rekordbox to do. It takes external inputs. It works as a controller. It really, for $1,700, does everything that it should do, other than get really fancy. It doesn't have any super fancy effects. It doesn't do any fancy routing or anything like that, but as far as anything that you would want a basic Pioneer setup to do, it does that and more. It looks sharp, it looks professional, sitting in any room, bedroom, DJ booth, basement, wherever you put it. It looks like a professional setup, which is important to a lot of people, and I think that you're really going to enjoy it. And you can save a lot of money if the alternative is paying $5 or $6 grand for a full Nexus setup. Now, to be fair, I need to knock off a couple of points in the interest of practicality, and here's why. This thing is heavy. It feels really heavy to carry around. I put it on my postal scale, and it comes in at exactly 20 pounds, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but this thing is large, it's cumbersome, and it's a lot more difficult to carry around a 20-pound piece that's this big versus something that would fit in your hand that's 20 pounds, obviously. So it just becomes a little bit difficult to carry around, and that's going to make it difficult for you mobile DJs. The other thing is this display right here juts out from the rest of the controller a good couple of inches and really just screams hazard to me. And as you're moving it around, it's all too tempting to want to grab that when you're moving it around or rotating it or something. Even if you're just, if you know better, I've had this thing here for 4 or 5 days, and I've had to catch myself and stop myself from doing it just to rotate it or something, move it around. Obviously, that's a problem with me and not Pioneer, but it makes me a little bit worried about if you're the kind of DJ that needs to bring this to a lot of different types of gigs, if you're going to be bringing it in and out of clubs and that sort of thing, moving it around or having other people move it around, you don't want to use this as a handle for sure. I kind of hesitate to recommend this to a lot of mobile DJs because you can get around this a little bit by putting it in a coffin case, but of course, then you're adding a lot more weight and you've got to carry that around as well. If you do a lot of mobile gigs and a lot of moving things around and other people are going to touch your stuff, I would be a little bit worried about this. Now, of course, that's not necessarily who this system is for. This is really more meant for that kind of club or festival type of DJ or any kind of DJ who's going to need to play on a lot of other people's equipment. If you need to play on a shared system, it makes sense for that shared system to be industry standard stuff, and in the DJ world, that is Pioneer DJ gear. This gets you introduced into that world, the club world, the festival world, anywhere that you might need to play or swap with other DJs, things like that. This gets you into that world. It doesn't do a lot of fancy stuff. This is just, hey, I want to DJ, and I want to know how to do it on the big boy equipment. All right, so now that we've spent some time crawling over this thing, playing with it, and talking about it a little bit, it's time to give it a rating. Now, first we'll rate quality. In this category, we're looking for things like sturdiness and quality of materials. Everything on the RX2 feels sturdy and heavy. I have no complaints in regards to quality and never had a single hiccup while playing music on it. It gets an 8.5 out of 10. For practicality, we score things like size, portability, and connectivity options. The RX2 has all the important ports and hookups and is a one-stop shop for everything that you need to DJ digitally. However, its size and weight make it a little bit cumbersome for some situations, such as for some mobile DJs, and it gets a 6 out of 10. In the significance category, we rate things like how innovative or unique its features are, or its importance within the industry. The original XDJ-RX was a pretty significant release because it finally allowed for a more professional Rekordbox experience at home in an all-in-one unit. The RX2 is an improvement on its predecessor, but doesn't do anything particularly groundbreaking, and it gets a 7 out of 10. I love the design of the XDJ-RX2. It looks very professional and shouldn't look out of place in any DJ booth. I hate when DJ hardware looks like it was made by Fisher-Price or tries to get overly flashy with bright RGB LED buttons that do chase patterns and marquees. That's not how Pioneer does things in this price point. Also, everything makes complete ergonomic sense and the user interface is completely intuitive. I give it a 9 out of 10. In the value category, we measure bang for buck. That's hard to quantify for this one. I give it a 7 because it's hard to recommend something like this to someone on a budget and tell them it's a bargain, but when you compare it to the type of setup it's sort of meant to simulate, like a larger Nexus setup, it starts to make a whole lot of economic sense. For fun factor, I rate how pleasant the user experience is and talk about creative options. The RX2 has some basic effects and looping capabilities, but it doesn't do anything really fancy like sequencing, sampling, or remixing, and it is limited to 2 channels, which will be a deal breaker for some DJs. I give it a 7.5 out of 10. If you average all these scores together, you get a final score of 7.5, a respectable score, but I think it's deceptively low, pulled down a bit by its size and weight, which might be irrelevant to the home user, and its value score, which is certainly arguable. Overall, for the right DJ, I think the XDJ-RX2 is just about the best piece of hardware in its segment of standalone DJ systems. So what are my final thoughts on the Pioneer XDJ-RX2? hey, it's a great system. It's not going to be the system for everybody. People who like a whole lot of effects and fancy features, this probably isn't for you. People who are very focused on portability, this is not going to be for you. It's going to break your back. It's going to take up too much room. It's going to be a little too cumbersome. But for that DJ who wants that pioneer setup that you're going to see at nightclubs and festivals, but doesn't want to shell out all that money, doesn't want to buy the separate components, doesn't want to spend thousands of dollars doing it, this is a way to get into really the next best thing for $1,700. Some people are going to balk at that price, but for some people that's going to be an extreme value. And for that DJ, this is going to be the one for you. And one thing I wanted to comment on is that there is a certain simplistic nature to this particular DJ system. And what I mean by that, we live in an era where this DJ hardware, mixers and controllers especially, suffer from what we call feature bloat. Manufacturers are trying to stay relevant and cram a whole bunch of features in. And this really, in contrast to a lot of that stuff that's coming out these days, stands in opposition to that. It's very minimalistic in some ways. It does have effects, but there's not an extreme emphasis on effects like there is on some Pioneer mixers. Some people aren't going to like that, and this won't be for those DJs. Personally, I love that. I'm not an effects-heavy DJ. I really like to let the music speak for itself, and I use effects more like tools to help with build-ups or transitions and things like that, rather than to just add extra layers of effects. So that works for me. It's not going to work for everybody. And then you've got your, a basic couple of effects that have been on Pioneer mixers for years over here. But basically, you've just got a 3-band EQ. You've got your faders, your crossfader, and your basic decks and your browsing setup. Everything is laid out in a completely logical way. This is really tough and sturdy. It's cumbersome, it's heavy, so portability score comes down a little bit. But other than that, I think a lot of you are really going to love this thing. And if you do and you decide to buy it, please consider buying it using the links in the description box of this video. Thank you guys so much, and don't forget to check out the Passionate DJ podcast. We release a new episode every Monday. Subscribe, and we will see you soon. Thanks.